Thank you, Barbara. It should be, in that little envelope thing. Yeah, and right by my desk. No, this in there. Yeah, but in my office, right next to my desk, there's usually a clipboard with a pen hook to it. If it is there, can you grab that? And then what's on the sign is. If the clipboard's not there, don't worry about it. All right, technical difficulties. All right. Oh, gosh. I'm going to get this out again tonight. I promise we're going to start in a minute. I was ready at like 10 to 7, and then things happen.
You have dinner, and then you have your dinner, and then you have to have this. It's kind of hard to do two things at once.
I saw you've done nothing all day.
Oh my gosh. It has been a crazy day, and we actually had a concert. You're coming to my class, Bert?
No. You set yourself up for that.
I was like, wow.
Christmas miracle.
No problem.
Bye.
We want to keep going.
Okay.
If I have time, I'll come back.
Oh.
Bye, Mark.
Sorry, guys.
Bye.
Well, shucks, I thought he was coming. In case any of you don't know, he's my brother-in-law. That's why in case there's anybody here who didn't know that. So welcome tonight. Here we are at our last week of class. Kind of sad, although sometimes I need a break because Wednesdays are a little bit crazy. But I really enjoyed being here with everyone. I know we're missing a few people tonight. They're traveling, there's parties, there's just so much going on. So I really appreciate those who are able to come tonight. Appreciate it. So tonight, what I really want to do tonight is kind of wrap up and kind of talk about so now we've kind of scratched the surface and learned a few things, and where do we as individual people, but then where do we as a congregation, is there anything we can do together, and is there more that we could learn? So I thought we could spend the rest of our time kind of looking at that. I do have one other thing I want to talk about tonight at the beginning, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's see. Oh, that's right. Nope. Oh, never mind. Okay, so our land acknowledgement. Tonight we are gathered on the traditional homeland of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Ottawa. They were stewards of the land long before Arlington Heights was settled by European immigrants. Remember, this actually is not First Presbyterian of Arlington Heights' land acknowledgement, but kind of a combination of a couple different places around here. So that's one thing that we might think about if that would be something appropriate that a group might want to work on. So I have every week we've kind of looked at a review to remind us what the doctrine of discovery is. And because at the end of tonight, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a man named Mark Charles. I thought that I would take a quote from him about what he uses to describe the doctrine of discovery. So he says, the doctrine of discovery is essentially the church in Europe saying to the nations of Europe, wherever you go, whatever land you find not ruled by white European Christian rulers, those people are subhuman and their land is yours to take. This doctrine, issued and signed by 2 Catholic popes in the 1400s, gave permission in the name of Christendom to monarchs to enslave, capture, and dispossess other human beings for profit, land, and power. And that's why we gather as a faith community to talk about these issues. Because really all of these things started with the church. Oh, yes, you may. Oh, and if everybody could sign in.
The church kind of made it official,
Yes.
but all of those rulers, they were busy stealing everybody else's land
Yes.
everywhere they went, or anywhere near where they were, and they were fighting against other groups who were arguably much better at stealing other people's land than they were
Yes, you're right.
in the early parts.
In the early, right.
So this isn't, the fact that the church sanctified it is historically maybe a little odd, but these guys would have done it anyway.
They very well might have.
They were
Hard.
doing it already.
They were. I think that the point, they're kind of trying to make, though, is if you look at the United States, who really was built on Christian ideals, whether we think that or not, I think that's like somebody like Mark Charles, that's where he's going to. But remember the very first class, we said it's quite complicated, and we only have 5 hours. But you're right. There, who knows what would have happened had the church not said, you can do this. You're right.
When the Vikings came over and they got into the Newfoundland, first thing they did when they saw some Indians was try to kill them.
Right.
And I don't know that they were necessarily Christian.
Right.
Some of them were made perhaps at that time. So this was
I'm going to get it in a minute. Yeah.
bad manner. That people all over the world had.
Yes, you're right. And still have.
Yes.
And still have.
We can look at the news and we see this nasty stuff going on right now.
Right.
And we can all say we don't approve of that sort of stuff. But it was very common in those days. It's still common.
Right. Yes, it's still common. It was back then. We're kind of, like I said, slicing the surface of some of this and, trying to look at it from a faith perspective. Yep.
I wasn't around in the 14th century. Close, but not. The justification, I believe, or I suspect, of the popes producing that doctrine was the idea that anybody who dies not being a Christian goes to hell forever. So they may have thought they were helping the non-Christians by doctrine, by teaching them Christian doctrine. So maybe they might not burn forever in hell.
Yes, I suspect that there were a lot of different reasons for what went on. Anybody else want to comment on? Well, that just brings us right to my next slide. So questions and comments from the previous week. Look, we had a couple, so that's great. I appreciate that everybody's thinking about these things, and obviously, many different viewpoints and many different ways of looking at things. This is just one of them, and I understand that it, like we said in the very first class, it's pretty complicated. So I was hoping that we might be able to pass around the microphone a little bit. And I wanted to know anybody who might be willing to tell us one thing you heard over the past weeks that surprised you. Thanks, Laura. Anybody? Something that you just were kind of shocked to hear.
For them to, yeah, you can't, if you refuse, you can't tell all the kids you have to cut your hair and you can't have your language and you have to dress like Americans, and that's not, no, and also it's not right to have, oh yeah, they were first, and then the Europeans just, oh, you have to go, and then you have no choice, and then that was not right.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, Dawn, back. There might be some people online, and then they can't hear.
So I was very shocked about the astronomical amount of the missing women. I mean, I heard about missing women, but I didn't know that the number was so vast. So that really shocked me.
Right. I wish that we would have had more time, actually, to talk more about that. But maybe in a future discussion. Part 2, yes. Where we can deal some more with, because we went through so much history that we didn't have as much time for some of the current topics. We'll see. Betty, wait for the microphone in case anybody's watching.
A recent television series featuring Hillary Swank that came from New York to Alaska
Yes.
and worked for a newspaper called Alaska Daily.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked with an indigenous woman to track down the murdered and indigenous women that are missing. And it was a fascinating and incredibly, from my standard, not knowing a thing, that it was incredibly well done. And I'm watching to see if there will be a season 2.
I know, I'm wondering too. I don't know if there will be. You never know with those shows. Has anybody else seen that show, Alaska Daily? Yeah. It's Netflix, right? I think it's on Netflix. I'm pretty sure. Oh. Oh. I think you can get it on Netflix. Anybody else like to share anything? All right. Well, this is along the same lines, but I'm just wondering, is there anything, I think probably like what Dawn shared with us about the missing, murdered indigenous women, something that's really stayed with you over the weeks, that you've kept kind of thinking about, like, oh, I think I might want to know more about that, or just anything like that. Yes.
We don't know in the past, like, who our ancestors were, like if they were Caucasian, African American, we don't know that. That's the only thing.
I like that.
I was shocked that they pulled these young kids and put them in these orphanages and they abused them, and it was just awful. I didn't realize all that. And then it was on TV the very next day.
Yes. I know I've talked to a couple people who said that since they've been coming to this class, whether it's true or not, they suddenly are noticing things on the news. And maybe we just didn't hear it before. I don't know. Barbara?
So the thing that really concerned me is when they were, the children were put in these schools and they had to cut their hair and they had to, like, not have any connection to their culture. And my thought is, like, how do we help that be recovered? And you know, can we do that? Because that's their whole history that we've erased from them.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what I was disturbed by.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Dawn?
So one of the other things that stayed with me was like piggybacking off of. No.
Liz?
Okay, Elaine.
Elaine.
Piggybacking off of Elaine. how you were talking about your family tree and how you went back and back and dig so deep. And my wife, she was going like through the same thing. So it's just like you don't know how far back your actual family tree goes, and that it just kind of stuck with me. Like, who am I for real?
Right. Lynn?
There was an article in a magazine that I saw about Canadians, so I always kind of thought of this as an American thing. But it was in Canada how all of these Native children were sent to schools away from their families, and they weren't even called by names. They were called by a number.
By a number.
And all of these children were dying from diseases and neglect, and they were just buried in mass graves. And now they're just finding out about it in Canada.
Right. So actually Canada started the kind of boarding school reconciliation, kind of that movement. It actually started in Canada, which opened the eyes of people in the United States. So they actually are quite a bit further along in their, really looking at it. They have had a lot more of remains of children returned to their tribes and things like that in Canada, but it really opened the eyes and made the United States start looking at like Carlisle School and then more and more schools. So yes, Canada, I think they're a little bit ahead of us, but anybody else? Anything you want to share?
I guess it's something I've thought about a lot since, particularly hearing more about the boarding schools and how the children were robbed of their culture and the generational trauma that came from that. You have mothers and grandmothers and great-grandparents, and how that just leads to so many social problems and, cultures being kind of disorganized in societies. Indian society is there's just full of alcoholism and poverty, and now I have a better idea, perhaps, of how that came to be, and it was very intentional. They were intentionally wronged, intentionally harmed. Every Native American group in this country, I think, is bearing the scars of what we did to them, and that's sad. Very sad.
And Ken?
Actually, I want to backtrack to the first question, what surprised
Sure.
me. The fact that there was a boarding school here in this local area.
Yeah.
I always think of it out west or Canada or somewhere place, but no, it was our people in this area also were complicit in it.
Right.
I was surprised how much it reminded me of what is happening to the Uyghurs in China. You must be isolated in one area. You cannot have your religion. You have to look like us, and you cannot have your language. And it's going to be the same legacy. It can't bring health, can't bring strength.
Which
It
kind of
can't-
goes to what Bill was saying, that, it
It's not
continues
over.
with different religions and different people. Anybody else? Well, thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate that. And then just a question, do you feel like, this is something I would like to continue to learn more about? Does it seem, obviously we have so much more we could learn. Amy?
I was excited that you were part, the whole family, you were part Cherokee.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're part Cherokee, and I thought that was kind of cool. I know it's but I think it's kind of cool. The whole family is part Cherokee.
Thank
and I
you.
never knew that.
Well, sometimes you find out things about people that you weren't
Yes,
expecting,
yes,
right?
it is, and I think that's kind of cool, though.
I think it's kind of cool too, actually.
Yes, it is,
So-
because it's fun. I don't know. I
I
mean,
still can't speak my Cherokee to you. I was practicing this week, but I have one word at the end.
okay.
Anybody else? All right, let's move along. So this was what I wanted to talk about just for a few minutes before we talk about what can we do individually, what can we do as a congregation, what can we do as a larger people of faith, to kind of right some of the wrongs that have happened. No matter how they did happen, we do know things like boarding schools, intergenerational trauma that was caused by removing people from their land. We know those things are true and happened. But I wanted to talk about this for just a minute because this is really in Illinois. This just happened this year. As some of you might know, there are quite a few sacred sites in the state of Illinois. How many people have been to Cahokia Mounds? So those sites, even where when we lived in this area, but my parents built a house up in Buffalo Grove, just by Dundee Road. It was a pretty new area. There weren't many houses there. Buffalo Grove High School was not there yet. And we had a lot of fields. And I'm a little bit embarrassed now that I know what I know to tell you this, but we used to go out in the fields and look for Indian arrowheads, and we would find them all the time. But when you start to think about those things that you found, an arrowhead maybe not, but what else is there? And so many of those items were taken and put in museums, including until recently, if you went to the Field Museum, they have now redone their exhibit. And has anybody been to the new exhibit yet? It is worth the trip. But they used to, when I would go on field trips as a child, you could see people like Indian skull heads and things that were part of their sacred rituals in the museum, which means we found them, we took them from their sacred lands. Remember how much we've been talking about how the land, you're part of the land. It's not something you just own. So Mark Walker, who's pictured in this picture with our holy troublemakers this summer, he actually introduced Illinois House Bill 3413, which was called the Human Remains Protection Act. He introduced that a while ago and worked, that act is really to set up a process to return human remains and artifacts to Native people. And it's not an easy, it doesn't happen overnight. But that bill was actually signed by Governor Pritzker in August of 2023. So he actually came to speak to Holy Troublemakers and told the kids about how he came to speak to them about advocacy and how he got involved in that project and that bill and why it was important to him and why it should be important to everyone. And one of the things that he told these kids that it stuck with me, and I'm sure it stuck with some of them, was that he said to them, how would you feel if somebody went and dug up the grave of your grandmother and then took her to a museum and took her regalia that she had on and put it in a museum? And somehow we thought that that was okay to do. And so this is just a picture of him gathered with us. He has an office right on Northwest Highway. He works really hard on this issue. He actually right now is working on the process for those returns. We're actually the second largest, we have the second largest collection of unpatriated remains in the United States, in Illinois. And I think sometimes we forget, somebody said, you forget that these things happened in Illinois too. It wasn't just out west or Oklahoma or on the East Coast. They were also right here in Illinois. Any questions on that, or there actually was a news story this morning on the radio about this bill and the work that he's doing. If you ever want, you can even just like stop in his office. He's pretty friendly. He'll talk to you about it. He's really great. He's actually also working to possibly establish some type of reservation land in Illinois. I don't know if he'll be successful, but he is trying. Amy?
What's his it's on Northwest Highway?
Yeah, so his name is Representative Mark Walker.
But what's
He's a state representative.
Yeah, but what
Oh.
I'm in
Like right kind of on the other side of by a Javier's.
Oh, I'm not that far from
No, you're not. I guess that's what I'm saying. This guy lives right in our town.
Okay. Oh, okay.
He's actually a resident of Arlington
Oh,
Heights.
okay.
Now we all know.
Yeah. I actually thought about having him come to talk, but he talks for a really long time. And we only have an hour each night, so I couldn't do it. But he's really great. He would tell you he talks for a long time. Right. All right. So any other comments on that? I just wanted to make sure that we got that in because that's a very local Illinois thing that's going on. You may see opportunities to get involved with that. All right. So where do we go from here? Now we've got all this knowledge. We learned all these things. We heard these things. We heard about Deb Holland doing her tour around the country to hear from survivors. So I kind of broke it into 3 things that I thought made sense. So one is individual action or commitment. So possibly you have something that you could do on your own. Or make a commitment to learning more or supporting an organization or anything like that. If anybody wants to tell me their idea now, I'm happy to hear it. But otherwise, we'll keep going. Anybody? Okay. You can make a commitment to learn more. So I'm hoping that over the next year or 2, that we'll have other opportunities. I'm going to tell you about one at the end of tonight, but other opportunities for learning more, digging deeper. So we talked about, last week we only had like 5 minutes to talk about missing, murdered Indigenous women. We know there's a lot more we could talk about that. So things like that. And then advocacy. So one of the things that I brought, I'm trying to remember not to walk away from the microphone. But you might remember when we talked about the boarding schools, I talked about the Truth and Healing Commission for the Indian school boarding schools. And I have these flyers up here again if anybody didn't get one. But these are bills and legislation that are being worked on right now. And you might start hearing about them in the news. And so if you do, and you're interested in advocacy and making a difference that way, those are things that you can do. Is just, paying attention. So people like Mark Walker, if you see him in the local news and you see that he's working on something, you can call, you can write, you can get other people together. So that's what I'm talking about advocacy. But I'll have these here. There's quite a bit of information on this little flyer. Any questions on that? Susan?
You subscribe to Native News, I think it's called.
Yes.
Can you say the name of it again?
Yes, so this is an online newspaper. It's called Native News Online, and they'll deliver to your inbox every day. I think that you can select, like, different, it's free. It doesn't cost anything, and it really, it gives a lot of information.
This week it had 3 bills that are now in Congress in the House, and how do you push them or whatever. So
Yes.
that was that Monday or Tuesday?
I can't remember which, I think it was,
Monday or Tuesday, but if you
yeah.
go to their website, you can backtrack on other articles. I mean, they have a whole setup, and you just keep on scrolling through them. But they had 3 bills this week.
Yeah, usually when you get it in your inbox, it'll have 3 or 4 like top stories of the day. It covers all the tribes. It's not just Navajo or Cherokee or Ojibwe. It's not. It covers everything. Quite amazing that because every tribe is different and has different issues going on. So if you have found a lot of interest in this, it's worth having. They'll have 3 or 4 top stories, and then underneath it, it'll have other links to things that maybe are related to that. But it's Native News Online. Anybody else? Thank you. Somebody else who reads that. And that was actually where I found out. Remember last week I talked about the summit that was going on in Washington, D.C. that wasn't in the news anywhere. And all the tribal leaders were in Washington, D.C. for a meeting with President Biden. And it wasn't in any of the major news sources, but I did see it there. Yep.
What it will also do is tell you things on the weekends if any of you want to go to a powwow or lectures. I mean, they're not, the whole state, so I mean, the whole United States is in there, so you can whittle it down to the area. So that they have all that also.
Thanks. Yeah, there's lots going on. So I'm going to kind of go through each of those 3 things. So individual actions, commitments you can make. So a lot of you probably already know this story, but I'll tell it for those of you who don't. But this is the garden in the back of the church. And one of the ways that after I went on the travel seminar, and I was really just trying to put everything together that I already knew and I learned, and how could I just keep it fresh in my mind? And one of the presentations that we went to that we heard about intergenerational trauma, they gave us some little corn kernels. It was part of a healing circle process. And so I planted those corn kernels in our Loaves and Fishes garden. And I forgot to bring the corn down tonight, but this is the corn when it was growing. It actually got much bigger than this and produced purple corn like you see out west. It was really quite beautiful. And it's just every day when I would walk out there or walk around the outside of the building, I would see this and remember just the land. And it could be small things like that that can just help you kind of stay grounded in what you're thinking about. So planting a garden and trying to get back to the earth. How many people here have a garden already? Quite a few. Yep. I know, sometimes you might not have a place that's easy to have a garden. I know. Right. I mean, you can stop by and look at the Loaves and Fishes garden. Right. But I find that gardens, plants, those types of things are a good way to kind of keep you thinking about that. So I'm hoping my corn kernels will grow again this year. I hope. So I wanted to tell you about the American Indian Center. That is actually located in Chicago. It is an urban center. It was actually the first urban organization in 1954 was started. That was at the time when United States government had a plan to get people to move off of the reservation and move to the cities. And so a lot of times you may hear of Native Americans who grew up in San Francisco or grew up in Los Angeles or grew up in Chicago. And many moved to big cities in hopes of doing better. Didn't always work out, but that was the plan. Does anybody, you know people that might have been part of that, or did you want to make any comment, or are you just saying that you did? No?
It's a very hard life for them because they can't do any of their traditional things.
Right.
Because there's no land, there's just no area to do it. I mean, and most of them are plains or wetlands, so they've lost the connection with the bison and all that. And it's a very hard life for them.
Some of you remember last week when we listened to Reverend Martha on the podcast. She's actually a pastor at an urban PCUSA church in Phoenix, Arizona. Some of you might have still been standing here. Jerry Olszewski actually went to seminary with her. So that was a neat connection. And Jerry couldn't be here tonight because she's traveling to see her great-grandchild that was born in November, so kind of exciting. But American Indian Center, they have a lot of resources. They actually, they do hold powwows, I think once or twice a year, open to the public. They have beading classes, things like that. So, but also you can go on their website and they have resources that you can find. It depends on where it is, but it's a gathering, usually of Native Americans to celebrate some time of what? Yeah, there's usually some drumming, some of their dances, sometimes some sacred ceremonies that aren't always open to the public for that part of it. There's also an organization in Schaumburg. I believe it's called, the Trickster Center. Have you ever been there?
It's Trickster Gallery.
Trickster Gallery.
They have a gallery there, and they also have different, they bring different Native people there. They do have a small museum, and they do a lot of stuff there.
And I think they're focused on veterans.
A lot of it is. Because they'll go to some of the area powwows and deal with that. Also Evanston has.
And Evanston has a museum.
Initial museum in Evanston, which is more of a museum.
Yes.
Then Trickster is more of a half museum art gallery that you can purchase things.
Okay. And they are actually having a holiday fair this weekend, I believe. So if you're interested, you could look them up. Then I wanted to tell you about a couple of organizations, because one of the things that you can do is find ways to support organizations that are trying on reservations to make a difference. So one of them that the woman who's on their board that I met on the travel seminar, she actually also joined Holy Troublemakers this summer, and you can see her on Zoom. I didn't have a good picture of her other than that, but she works for an organization, a nonprofit called Chinle Planting Hope, and you can look them up online. Their main focus is literacy on the reservations. They actually have a bookmobile, so they often will have congregations can do book drives. Holy Troublemakers actually sent their fundraising money this year to Chinle Planting Hope because they were just about to have they had a big summer reading program, and then they had a celebration at the end with prizes and food and all of those types of things. So Kathy Mitchell is a PCUSA, she's an elder at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Chinle, where we've talked about quite a bit while we've been here. That is the location of Basketball or Nothing. So for those of you, if you haven't watched it, I'm still putting a plug in for that one because it's very good. We had a great time visiting with her. The kids asked her a lot of good questions, but they work really hard to bring books to the children on the reservation. That we certainly have talked quite a bit about an area where even running water is difficult. They have a beautiful bookmobile that they drive around, and they just actually received a huge grant that they're going to build an actual physical library. But we'll keep their bookmobile because not everybody can get to the library. So this is just one. I'm just going to tell you about a couple because there's a lot that you can find. But these are ways that you can be supportive of these organizations. Another one is Tewa Women United. And I touched on this a little bit when we talked about Oppenheimer and we talked about the natural resource issues and the uranium mining. Tewa Women United is actually located in Espanola, New Mexico, which isn't far from Los Alamos. And they do a lot of work with women's reproductive rights among the Tewa people. And the Tewa people are the people that lived in the area where the U.S. government, Oppenheimer, that whole thing where they went in and moved them out. They do a lot of work around stopping the uranium mining. So their website is quite good, and they have a lot of information. They did a lot of work when Oppenheimer came out to kind of expand on the story. I think they were glad that the story got out there, but they felt like the whole story wasn't told.
I think we're spoiled.
Us?
Yes, I think we are very spoiled because when you look at other countries, they're not as fortunate as us. Because, you know, we got food, you know, we got everything provided for us. Some people don't have those things like what we have.
You're right.
We're very lucky that we're in the United States, that we help each other out.
Right. So sometimes we have to figure out if there's people that aren't getting as much help as maybe we are.
But still, you know, we do the best we can.
Sure. You're right. And they have a wonderful website. So I wanted to tell you about them. This is actually the organization where I got my corn from. So they also do a lot of workshops on intergenerational trauma, and they're able to demonstrate how that trauma passes down generation to generation. And like Kim was talking about, how you could better understand than how the conditions are on reservations sometimes. All right, so this is the PCUSA Native American Church Property Fund. This is something that you personally and our congregation and other congregations can participate in. So I want to tell you a little bit about this and talk a little bit about it because my passion in my day job is, of course, keeping this building in working order. And my passion in the nighttime is keeping other places working. So it's kind of one of those things. But this was a fund that was established by the General Assembly in 2018. And they did some studies, and in 2020, they actually came out with a report that the Native American churches, the PCUSA ones, remember we kind of focused on that. You can look up a list of them online. They're all over the place. And what really happened was that missionaries went in thinking that they were going to be there forever. I mean, I don't know that missionaries went in necessarily with bad intentions as missionaries, thinking that, but then the Board of Foreign Missions, which is interesting that they were called foreign missions, in the United States, closed down. And many missionaries then had to leave, and these churches were all still there. And there's many of them all over the United States. They have about $9 million of work that needs to be completed to keep to keep their buildings safe for worship. And actually, when I think about it, $9 million, I mean, it's a lot of money, but when you really think about it, if you took the whole PCUSA and we started funding this fund, maybe it wouldn't be that difficult. These pictures are actually, I pulled these out of like my archives, basically. These pictures are actually from South Dakota, from the reservation near Sisseton, the Lake Traverse Reservation. Our congregation, for quite a number of years, went there and did, among other things, one of the things that we did do was work on the Native American churches on that reservation to do some rehab of roofs. The picture with the guy in the blue shirt, we were actually redoing the electrical in that church. The other one is actually my daughter Kelly and another one of our travelers. They were repairing a fence around a cemetery. So we have done some of this work. And then this is just a picture of one of the churches that I just thought was nice. Barbara's had been on a couple of those trips, 3, yep. So we know that there's work to be done. Lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. So, because of this, and one of the, I presented about this fund to the mission committee a month ago, and so our bookmarks on Sunday mornings for the first quarter of 2024, so January, February, March, our bookmark collection will be going to this property fund. So I'm really excited about that. And I was reading an article today that was written by a missionary who has worked on some of these reservations, and he's like, oh my gosh, you think about, well, wait, my church building is falling apart too. But if we can help with that, and we can help a little bit with this fund. There's actually the travel seminar participants that I was on the trip with. We all, there's actually a campaign out there between all of us to see what we can do. And this was one of them, was to donate to this PCUSA fund. And I believe that right now we're up to about $25,000. So there were, I think, 30 of us on the trip. So that's pretty good, I thought. Does anybody have any questions about that fund, or exactly what it is? Or, and then the fund is managed, I believe, through the Presbyterian Foundation. And then I think that churches can apply for grants for work to be done. There's actually an article in the January Chimes. And they also have a website. All right, so advocacy. Those of you who've been to any of my other classes that I've done, I often talk about changing the paradigm. So changing kind of the way that you look at things. And this is this has nothing to really do with Native Americans, but this is one of my favorite books. It's called Changing Lenses. And it's really about one of the things I'm hoping that you get out of this class is that it changes the way maybe you look at reservations and the way you look at maybe some of the stereotypes, that we all sometimes have and biases. And maybe this class could really change the way that you look at that. That would then make you want to advocate for people who might be just needing a little bit of help and need us to be a voice and need us to partner with them. So that is, somebody already brought it up, but I said you could subscribe to Native News Online, because if you do that, you will see all of the bills and the legislation that is out there. There are people working really, really hard to try and make a difference. So if you subscribe to that, you will see it. And hopefully you'll see something there that might strike you, because unless we can change some of the systems, like individual acts are, I think, wonderful, but if we don't change the way that we're looking at things and the way we're thinking about them, then nothing's going to change. Mm-hmm. Yes. You're right. It does. That's how you change the world, is by, speaking up when it's right to speak up and partnering with people. I don't think that people like Kathy Mitchell, who I met, she doesn't want us just to come in there and give them everything or any of those kinds of things. They're looking for partners. They're looking for people who want to work with them and alongside them. But sometimes we have a voice, so we can call representatives and we can do things like that. And so I think that's important. Sometimes we are. Sometimes we are. Right. Mm-hmm. All right. The last one I had on there was opportunity to learn more. And I always think that's important. I think that all changes in systems and ways of us thinking really come out of education and out of learning and experience. And so one of the things I'm hoping probably through Stonecatchers this year is that we might do a book study. It can be a very small group, but this book delves much deeper into some of the things we've been talking about, and it's by a man named Mark Charles. He is a Navajo and Dutch man, but he is a very fierce advocate for indigenous rights. He's actually working on another book. He's also very faithful Christian, so he talks a lot about how does he blend his Christian faith with his indigenous spirituality. If we find 10 people who would be interested in reading this book together, he will actually come online and do a 45-minute question and answer with us, which I think would be really spectacular to be able to learn from a person. So watch for that in the new year, if that's something that would interest you. And even if you can't read the whole book, we probably still welcome you to the group. Any questions on that? He actually has a weekly podcast. I think so. Yeah, I think you can. You can get it electronically at the library. Sure. I think you can get it at the library. He actually has a podcast. The name of it is My Second Cup of Coffee. He's just like one of those people that you can just sit and listen to. He has a knowledge base that's something else. Sometimes on My Second Cup of Coffee, he talks about politics. sometimes he talks about, he ran for president in 2020 as an independent, but still we've never heard of him, right? He sometimes talks about politics. He sometimes just talks about things going on in Native American issues. Sometimes he talks about his family, just all different things. So he's really great just to listen to and get an insight from him. So that is another opportunity for moving forward. Oh, wait. Oh, I have to hit it to make it play, right? So this is actually, we're kind of coming upon the end. And I wanted to show you this video. It's only about 1.5 minutes long. But it's actually Mark Charles talking about, he did this a number of years ago, but it's what it is like to be a Native American in the United States. And I think that it's really a way to kind of bring this class kind of full circle where we started, and learning and making us really think about maybe some people that we hadn't really thought about before. It's a very short video.
A question I frequently get asked is how does it feel to be Native American and still be a citizen of the United States of America? I often tell people that it feels like our Native community is an old grandmother who has a very large and a very beautiful house. And years ago, some people came into our house and they locked us upstairs in the bedroom. Today, our house is full of people. They're sitting on our furniture, they're eating our food, they're having a party in our house. They've even come upstairs and unlocked the door to our bedroom, but it's much later. And we're tired, we're old, we're weak, and we're sick. And so we can't or we don't come out. But the thing that is the most painful is that virtually nobody comes upstairs to find the grandmother in the bedroom. Nobody sits down next to us on the bed and simply says, "Thank you. Thank you for letting us be in your house."
That's his website if you're interested. Well, I hope that maybe we can be the people who do go upstairs and look for the grandmother upstairs. I hope that this class has made everyone think more about that, because I really I think that sometimes the Native American people are people that sometimes we've forgotten about. So I would love to end with us all reading that we read last week, this traditional Navajo prayer. I thought if you can see it, then we could read it together, and if you can't, then just listen along. As I walk, the universe is walking with me. In beauty, it walks before me. In beauty, it walks behind me. In beauty, it walks below me. In beauty, it walks above me. Beauty is on every side. As I walk with beauty. I think it is. This my one word I can say in Cherokee is wado, which is thank you. I truly appreciate all of you coming and learning and hearing about this, and I'm really looking forward to us being able to do more in 2024 and 2025. Watch for more opportunities and more ways that we can continue to learn. Watch the news. I'm pretty sure you're going to keep hearing more and more things. There was just a story on the news last night, this morning. So truly, I really thank you for being interested in this topic. Thank you. And we finished on time. I have one more thing, though. It has nothing to do with Native Americans. But I just saw Bob sitting over here, and today is Bob's 90th birthday. So I actually think that we should sing to him. And I'm not a good singer, but happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bob. Happy birthday to you. Bob was here at like 6:15 this morning to clean up from pads, so, and here he is tonight. I hope you had a nice lunch with your family, though. Good. Thank you, really thank you, everyone. Oh, the